Hello, and welcome to our monthly webcast. My name is Prabhat, and I'm a principal cloud consultant at Devoteam. We're talking about an interesting topic today. As the British economy is going through a tough crisis, the British pound has fallen to an all time low against the US dollar. In the world of Amazon Web Services, customers in the UK have to pay their monthly consumption bills in US dollars. Obviously, recent events have weakened the sterling against the dollar, meaning if you're using public cloud, you can expect an increase in the price of your consumption bill for October. As the pound hits a record low against the dollar, your cloud usage will cost you more. It comes as the UK government makes announcements to reform taxes and create stimulus packages to grow the UK economy. And I hope things do get better. For the time being, we are going to pay excessive on our bill consumption. Even the euro has reached a 20-year low against the dollar. This will mean if you are spending more than 10% in the last month and 20% more on your AWS cost than you might have done 6 months ago. Based on some maths that we read, I believe if you are paying £10,000 a month in July, you'll be paying approximately £11,350 in October. Please note, we're not only talking about the economy today, but instead, we're talking about how you can save on your AWS consumption. You definitely can't control the economy, but you can take steps to save your AWS bills. Though there is a wider FinOps offering, which is called as financial operations. Some people call it cost optimization. In this webcast today, we strictly talk about the ways you can cut your AWS bills, and we'll go through a customer case study too. Joining me on this webcast today are my two good friends, Simon Harris, who's a lead AWS solution architect, and Andrew Thompson, who's a lead AWS consultant and our in-house FinOps guru. Starting with Simon, you wrote a blog a couple of weeks back on this topic with Andy. Could you tell us what triggered that and what are the kind of things that the customers and our listeners today can do without seeking our expert help? Simon?
Yeah, thank you, Prabhat. So with the recent mini budgets, having spent a lot of time with different customers in the past, they've always been concerned about their cloud spend bill. And one of the conversations that always comes up is, oh, it's in US dollars. So with the pound at an all-time low, it got Andy and myself thinking, well, actually, this is going to be something that's forefront of quite a lot of the CFOs' minds. And as architects and operations engineers, chances are that you'll probably have come across those discussions at your own company recently too. So there's three high-level steps that I'm going to discuss with you today. Some of these you may already know, some of them you already actively do, but it's always good just to revisit the options available to you. So with an infrastructure review, are you using the right things? Are you using only what you need? Are you running things as leanly as possible? So when it comes to things like right sizing, it might be that you've got a very, very mature systems where you regularly build right sizing into your testing, your load testing, and you know that you're using the right instance types. But there'll be some customers out there that have created some systems and they have never revisited those things. So as we do more deployments, the compute and memory requirements can change a little bit. So things that we can always do and tools Amazon provide for us. One thing is the AWS cost optimizer. So this is a free tool to use, and it'll analyze your EC2, your Lambda, your EBS volumes. You may have third-party tools that you already use that can help you identify your compute requirements, your memory requirements, and that can lead on to quite some nice cost savings, particularly if you've got some large systems that scale a lot. The other thing in terms of sort of more static things, S3 buckets, files and objects stored in S3. There's the S3 analytics and intelligent tiering and lifecycle policies. So if you find that your S3 costs are increasing, these are things that you can also look at. Trusted Advisor, again, is something that is a very easy tool that if you don't have enterprise or business support, it is one thing that gives you a little bit of insight into what you're spending, along with other security things there. With RDS, for example, have you looked at your RDS usage recently? Your compute, your memory, are you using the right types? Does it scale? Does it give you the right performance? And one thing that I find with customers is that generally haven't really thought much about turning non-production off. They have it running all day, every day sometimes, or all day during the week. So Amazon provide out-of-the-box CloudFormation templates that help you deploy something called Instance Scheduler. So why not consider turning your production non-production systems off 12 hours a day during the week when no one's really using them, off at the weekend, so running non-production systems for 60 hours instead of 168 hours in a week. Some big savings there. Have you looked at your auto-scaling policies? Are you scaling on the right metrics? Do you have the right metrics there? Do you need custom metrics? And are you using spot instances for auto-scaling or Fargate, for example? So one thing that you can also do, if you have a TAM, or if you have a look at your compute, have you considered using savings plans? Do you know that there's savings plans? Do you know that there's reserved instances there? For larger customers, we can help you with looking at EDP discounts. So if you need help with that, or you're not quite sure what they are, engage with Devoteam to help you negotiate your EDP discounts. And I think Prabhat, you'll talk about that in a little bit more detail later. There's also compute and savings plans, and the EDP. The last thing on this slide is governance. So what we find is when customers move from a traditional data center model, the easiest thing to do is just to lift and shift and just move everything as it is into the cloud. But what generally doesn't get looked at particularly well is the governance around cloud. So do you have the right policies and controls in place to prevent your spend running away from you? So things like spending guardrails. Do you use AWS organizations? Do you have multiple accounts? Are you benefiting from economies of scale? So for things like S3, you can bunch all your Amazon accounts together and get tiered discounts where all your S3 storage, for example, is tiered accordingly rather than on an individual account basis. Consolidated billing, again, do you have full visibility on all your Amazon accounts? Do you know what you're spending? And that kind of leads nicely onto tagging policies. Do you have everything tagged? Are there things that aren't tagged? All these things can be set up with things like service control policies to implement tagging policies to make sure that things cannot get spun up without the correct mandated tags in place. And using something simple like the AWS budgets. Do you get notified when the forecast spend is going to go over budget? So if you imagine you've got 20, 30, 50, 100 accounts, this is very time consuming to go through every different account and run all these things. So the thing that we encourage you to do is to look at your applications. If you've done a lift and shift migration, have you then spent the time to look at actually what can we actually use in the cloud to better benefit cost savings, performance, scaling, reliability, and security? So the thing that we encourage customers to do is to actually modernize your applications. So have you moved to a more of a serverless model and a pay-as-you-go model, or do you have everything running all the time? So yeah, it's not a very efficient thing to do here. So with modernization, you'll find that legacy on-premise applications and databases for Windows and Linux, things like SQL Server, just get lifted and shifted and migrated, and you don't really save much. If in some cases, we actually find that some people are surprised that actually they're spending more in the cloud compared to a traditional data center. So the best way here, if you look at the top right, is to move to event-driven architecture. So moving to serverless, Lambda, SQS, SNS. How far can you decouple your applications? It might be that you've got large monolithic applications that all run on a few servers, and it's going to take some time to look at how we can do that. And that's something that Devoteam can do. We can help our customers achieve a more efficient IT by doing that. And it's not just cost savings, it's a better security model, it's lower time to market, and you can innovate a lot quicker using AWS native tools. So things like containerization. A lot of companies have heard of containerization. Some companies may not have really tested the water with containerization or don't know how to achieve the benefits of moving to containerization. So again, ask us to help you with that. Are you paying for SQL licensing where you think actually with a little bit of application modernization, we can use purpose-built databases that can be scaled and more cost efficient than traditional databases? Things that come to mind are Aurora and DynamoDB. Do you have a large monolithic data warehouse, for example? Are you getting the best benefit out of those licenses? Have you considered Redshift? One thing that a recent customer of ours looked at, and most benefit there, was they had some Windows servers, they're using .NET, and if they could move to .NET Core, they can run that on containers and run that in a nice serverless, performant, scalable architecture, rather than having to wait for Windows servers to boot up, wait for them to domain join if you needed them to domain join. Whereas with .NET Core, you can move to a more Linux-based system. It scales a lot quicker, a lot faster, and it's a lot cheaper. So the other thing there is part of the challenge of application migration is constantly looking at Amazon services. You may have gone through a modernization process some time ago, but new Amazon services have come out where you can actually achieve more savings by using some of these newer services. So how can Devoteam help? So we can provide some tools and help you with maturing your processes that can enable efficient migration. Some of these involve tooling where it can review your existing landscape. We can gain insight into your dependencies. We can identify code that can be automatically migrated versus manually upgraded. And it can also highlight areas that can benefit from modernization. This can allow us to work with you to estimate the scope of effort and develop a plan that is aligned with your business needs. Things like automation tools as well. If you don't have any mature CI/CD tooling, we can help you implement those in best practice enterprise methods, and it also reduces the toil of application deployment and infrastructure management as well. We can create new components with you and help you redesign any existing functionality and support your business needs as well. When it comes to modernizing integrations, we apply architecture techniques using the well-architected framework. We can sit down with you, work through the principles and techniques such as API first, microservices and containers, but also one thing that is overlooked quite heavily is how we can modernize your people, your processes, and your cultures. So yes, we can provide a whole wealth of services, whether it's cost optimization, migration, help you look at your budget, your bills, and work with you on a whole end-to-end life cycle of migrations from on-premise into the cloud.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that, Simon. I think the messaging is clear. There's cost reduction, cost optimization that you can do right away, but a long-term picture, when you need some expert advice, you can reach out to us. You mentioned a bit about enterprise discount program, which is an AWS terminology. I'm working with a customer right now where we're helping them negotiate a robust EDP and get benefits from different funding pods that are available from AWS. You mentioned about modernization. My colleague Ingvar, he's working on a different customer right now, wherein the TCO has led, wherein the customer is paying approximately $200,000, and now the bills are going to be around $35,000. We understand that there is a initial cost in modernization, but with appropriate budgeting, appropriate ROI, we can help you define that roadmap. Thank you for that, Simon. Now, you're wondering, why do you want to hear to us? We are an AWS Premier Partner. We've been in this line for a long, long time. And I'm sure you'd like to hear where we have done this before. To answer that, let me bring in Andrew Thompson, who leads our FinOps go-to-market. Andrew has been working with a London-based large financial institution on their cost reduction, setting up FinOps and governance for them. Welcome, Andrew. Could you tell us what are you kind of problems that you're solving with this financial institution?
Yeah, sure. So this case study kind of looks at the cost optimization piece. So we engage with the customer across broad FinOps activities. But as Simon said, there's lots of different activities you can do quickly to reduce your costs. But what you really want to do is move from those kind of one-off events onto a more sustainable process. So you don't have to keep coming back to this. You set it up in a proper way. And so this was some work we did, a large financial services provider. It's a really big enterprise scale company, multi-million-dollar monthly cloud spend, hundreds of application teams, thousands of engineers. And what we work with them on is to kind of move them to this more sustainable process. And so the first steps we did as we engaged with them was we did an assessment with them, ran through and understood where their priorities were. Did they have certain pieces in place already? Where were the gaps? And where were they spending most? What types of resources were they spending the most money on? Where could they get the most benefit? And then one of the first things we did is we delivered an anomaly detection system for them. So we put that together that met their business needs in terms of how they organize their accounts and their application teams, how they could get information back to those teams quickly. And this system's proved really useful. It's spotted multiple spikes early, like about $20,000 quite often. It's interesting because it catches different things. Sometimes it catches runaway resources, like a runaway Lambda or something, but sometimes it shows the business also that the way the customers are using their technology is actually possibly costing them more than they thought. They need to think about how they price their technology. And then the next piece we did was a kind of one-off on their sandbox accounts, where they had a lot of long-lived resources, where they had some ungoverned sandbox accounts. And so we did a cleanup on that. And that was about $500,000 in terms of sort of an annual reduction. And then we started looking at policies for them. So what we wanted to do is, in particular in their development environments, this is non-production, can we put in place some rules that will allow them to keep their costs under control longer term? And so this was done very much engaging with the engineering teams, because if you start running automated policies and start turning things off that engineering teams need, that's not helpful. And so this is done by aligning kind of what the business needs in terms of reduced costs with what the engineers need for their developed environments. And so this involved some out-of-hours shutdowns and automating that, and also deleting unused resources. They were kind of the two key cost reduction pieces. And because this is a large enterprise scale type of thing, the way we do this is not just ad hoc, where you let teams do this on their own. What we did was built a system, like a proper internal application, where what you need is you need the monitoring and logging across this system. You need opt-outs, because as a central team, the engineering teams know best what can be done. And so you have to give them the option to opt out, provide that flexibility, and also build in proper visualizations to show the value of these policies. They're meant to be reducing cost, so you need monitoring that shows you cost being reduced by these policies. And this has proved very effective. It had some initial large cost reductions, and it continues to run with low maintenance now. And then the last piece that this customer was really interested in was they were finding that some of the recommendations that were being provided to them, the feedback from the engineering teams was that this wasn't really useful to them, and they wanted some more customized recommendations. And so we built them kind of a recommendations engine that was tailored to the risks that they wanted to take in certain environments. And this has identified $3 million of real optimization opportunities. So it might give them a few less than Compute Optimizer or the Trusted Advisor, but they're much more actionable in terms of what the engineer needs to do. And so, yeah, that kind of covers it, really, I think.
Thank you, Andrew. I think there are some great wins for the customer out there. The three things that stood out to me was that having that multiple 20K anomalies that were caught early, $1.5 million worth per annum savings in year one, and the $3 million that has been forecasted for an optimization perspective. And as you rightly said, FinOps is just not a one-off activity. I see in the market with the other partners as well, they come and do one-off activity, and then a year later on, the same activity needs to be done again. I understand it's more about a FinOps is a culture change. A big challenge for any organization on a path of transformation is to understand how finance and IT are in sync with each other. That's in fact the basis of FinOps. Andrew, are you doing any kind of work with them where you're helping bridge the gap between IT and finance?
Yeah. So we're doing some work around that area as well. And like you say, bridge is the key word here. And you have to come into it with an understanding of both sides, both from the business side and a really deep understanding of the engineering side as well, and kind of have empathy for both sides. They both got very good points. And so some of the areas we look at around this is a common language, really, allowing these people to talk together properly, whether that's about tagging or about how you show your spend, these type of areas, and really linking these up together. And another one that's really important is just showing costs isn't really enough. You have to show your costs in context. So you could be spending $100 or $1 million, but how much is your application making in revenue? And these types of conversations to help build out this kind of common area with a big empathy for both sides of the business. And that allows them then to start moving forward and making the decisions that they want in the right way, that are data driven, and then they can build on that going further.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. You mentioned a few words that remind me of a book by Gregor Hope of Cloud Strategy. I've been reading that book, and where he absolutely talks about cloud is not IT procurement. It's a lifestyle change, and it does good things, and it brings the method of agile and working team, and understanding one common language has always been a barrier between finance and IT. Both need to have empathy towards each other. Thank you so much, Andrew, for your excellent work for this customer. I know the customer, and I hope we can tell the customer name at a future point, and they're very happy with your work. The numbers speak for itself. Thank you so much for that, Andrew. All right, we're almost at the end of the webcast here. I think the message is clear. You cannot control the exchange rate in the economy, but you can certainly control how you run your infrastructure on AWS. With correct guidance and experience, you can save costs and run sustainable services on Amazon Web Services. If you need any more information, feel free to reach out. Thank you both, Simon and Andrew, for joining me today on this webcast. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks.